Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veritas Voices. Thank you all so much for showing up. We appreciate it. If you have any questions throughout the show, please don't hesitate to put it into the live chat. The live chat isn't going to be streaming here. Frankly, it's the fault of all of us. We didn't bother to get a real producer. We hired some schmuck to produce the show who just really doesn't know what he's doing. So the live chat's not going to be scrolled up there, but we can all see it. Welcome to another Veritas Voices. Today is Meaning and Purpose, and we are thrilled we were supposed to be simulcasting today, but again, producer, what can you do? So I think next time we will be simulcasting both on the GDC and on our own channel. If you want to find our content, please go to the Veritas Voices YouTube channel and sign up there, and then you will just automatically see us when we come on to talk about something and get all uppity about God and religion and all that other good stuff. Please also don't hesitate to subscribe to the GDC, who we appreciate once again for hosting us, and to Lilith Liberated, Renee, and myself. And you can find us all on Twitter. We also have our own pages, and all of that will be in the description below. Let's see, next week we will be discussing Pascal's wager, which is one of my favorite topics, and I think we're going to enjoy that. So if that's something that interests you, please join us for that. And also, an interesting little side note, as you guys know, I've also been doing In Time, and we are going on Wednesday. We have on a very disreputable person, unfortunately. His name is Jim Majors, and he is an expert on biblical prophecy and has figured out that the Bible has predicted the Antichrist. The Antichrist is here. He is going to tell us who that is and why, and we're going to be discussing all biblical prophecy. I suspect that the answer is it is a tangerine-colored human being who is somewhat well known in the United States, walking tangerine. But we'll let Jim mention that, but that's for people who are interested in biblical prophecy and why we're all going to die. We'll be covering that on Wednesday. So I think, is there anything anyone else wanted to say before we get started, or where are we? What's going on?
No, I'm just glad to be back.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a whole couple of weeks. But I'm glad we're back. I'm glad we've got everything worked out. I love the new layout. You should know that.
Thank you.
Well, the whole topic of meaning and purpose, I can't recall which, I believe, Renee, you suggested it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
So, do you want to take the first round?
Well, it's certainly always a topic which usually comes up with people who are religious and who think that God has sort of given them a purpose in life. Like usually that purpose is believing in Jesus Christ, worshiping God, and serving the Lord and all that stuff. And what usually comes up then is, for me as an atheist, what is my purpose in life? How can I have purpose in life, and how can I have meaning in life without the existence of God? And to that, I pretty much say there are many different purposes which I can choose. I have already chosen different purposes for my life, like the career I want to pursue, the people I want to associate with, what I want to do with my life in general, where I want to travel, what I want to see in this world, and all that stuff. And I would also say pretty much that a purpose is never something that is sort of handed down to you. It's always something that you choose for yourself. That's even true for theists. I mean,
yeah,
God saying that the purpose in life is worshiping Him is a descriptive statement. It's still up to you to choose to worship Him or to reject it and say no. What God says doesn't interest me. I do what I want. So it's always a choice that you have to make for yourself.
Right, which of course is the greatest crime to believers. But I've noticed, and this will come up, so I'm just going to face it now. A lot of believers are incredibly rude about this point. They're like, oh, how could you be so, how could you have no purpose? And oh, I'm sorry, your life is meaningless. And on a couple of occasions, I've retorted with, I'm sorry you don't love your family enough to care about them or to find any meaning or purpose in life or love or any of that. I'm sorry you hate your family, basically, which does take them back, because sometimes you almost have to be as rude as they are to shock them, because you have to say something different than the last 300 times they've heard that. But it's like, seriously, do you find no value in love or truth or justice or any of that?
Well, I think we've had a discussion on ethics before, and I think one of the problems is, and this gets sort of into, it strikes me a lot as sort of similar to the problem of how can you be good without God, and this idea that without some meta grounding, we don't have purpose without a metaphysical grounding. We don't have morality without a meta ethical grounding, and I think that's one of the things that concerns me about people who with the idea of raising people religious. If we were to not teach religion until the age of reason, until the age of 18, 21, and then say,
There
here,
wouldn't be religion.
yeah, I think there'd be a lot of problems, and I think there'd be a lot more comfort with the idea of not having metaphysical or metaethical grounding in things. I think it's the people who are born expecting it and then have to challenge it that have this problem and can't see it that way. But if you look at communities where atheism is the dominant model, mental health is fine, the notion of purpose and meaning is fine, and people only have this problem when they expect a metaethical solution or metaphysical solution to the meaning of life, to the problem of life, what happens when we die, and then there's no answer to that, or that gets challenged. That's where people start to say there's a problem.
It's true, because they want it to be dictated to them, and I'm not
Mm.
sure why, because the use of the term objective when they talk about objective morality or objective purpose and meaning, I honestly don't think they know what they mean by that, because when I ask for definitions, I'll get a lot of fudging about, but sometimes they'll say something that, is purposeful regardless of context. And purpose is the rightful property of a mind. So like, means something to whom is the question. That's the real question, is, why does your life matter? Well, matter to whom? Even if it didn't matter to anyone else, it matters to me.
Well,
And I'm alive, and I'm going to remain that way as long as possible, because there's a lot of interesting shit.
So somebody once told me, oh, yes, Renee, I'm sorry.
Which also ties in with the whole debate concerning whether God is like the authority or whether he is just another being. I mean, why, for instance, ought I adhere to the purpose that God has designated for me? I mean, am I obligated to care that God has decreed that the purpose of life is to worship him? Because even if that were true, I wouldn't care. I still would say I have my own purpose, I have my own life to live, and people are meaningful to me because they mean something to me. And whether God says that a cow is more valuable than humans, or whatever is more valuable than the other thing, has little effect on me, on whether I personally value it.
Fair enough. And I mean, there was one, I'm trying to recall who said it to him, because we mentioned Hitchens just when we were, chatting before we went on. I won't get into him full scale, but he was speaking to someone at one point, and they actually said, he said, basically, you sound like a slave, essentially. And they said, I am a slave. I'm happy to be a slave for Christ. And he said, I think I need to go wash now. Like, that is just disgusting. And truth of the matter is, that is the purpose that Christianity offers, to serve God. You worship God to serve God. You do whatever God says to serve God. You do good to serve God. They also serve who only stand and wait, Milton on his blindness. Like, just everything is about serving God. Your purpose, according to Christianity, is to be a slave. And they won't usually use that term, especially not right up front, but that's what it is.
But
And that can fuck right off.
But you see, I think especially the more moderate Christians sort of get to have it both ways. So they have this metaphysical grounding. They say, okay, God gives me purpose. Well, what's your purpose? Well, I haven't figured it out yet. Maybe it's to be an engineer. Maybe it's to be a lawyer. Maybe it's to be a. So they still find meaning in life. They've just created an arbitrary, because I think the problem is, and Hitchens again, if you want to stay on Hitchens, said religion will exist so long as we're afraid of death. And I think the problem is it's that impermanence, and they want to have a purpose and meaning outside of, because Lilith, you had said important to who? Whoever it's important to eventually will forget, and they'll be gone, and whoever remembered them will be gone, and whoever remembered them will be gone. And so if you're going to have, we seek a purpose and a permanence. And this allows us to, at least by fiat, declare that it's there. Whether it's there or not is actually irrelevant. We're just declaring it by fiat, and then go forward and pick whatever purpose we want anyway.
I mean, my response to that would be, speak for yourself. I mean, just because you want eternal significance, just because you want to live forever, just because what we have right now, friendship, family, a beautiful world where we can explore nature, where we can see sites, where we can see beautiful cities, just because that is not good enough for you, doesn't mean that it isn't good enough for me, because I have no desire whatsoever to live forever. And your desire to live forever does not mean that the universe will care, or that this feeling or that this desire has any warrant or any basis in reality.
True. And that's one of the things life teaches you pretty hard if you don't accept it right off, is that what you want has fuck all to do with what is. And, you can kick and scream as much as you want, but reality doesn't care. So, but I have to say, as I get, I'm not old, but as I get older, it seems a very young thing to do to want to live forever. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I could have some sort of vampire long life, or, I could live for hundreds of years and learn lots of things, I would probably be okay with that. But forever? Good God, no. I mean, just, oh, fuck. By the end of 70 years, you are tired. And granted, if our metabolic process didn't slow down and all the rest of that shit, I don't know, maybe we could go for a little longer. But it is exhausting. It's just unfathomably exhausting to think of hundreds of millions of years, tens of thousands of years. And you can never get out. You can never get out.
Well, but it's a fantasy. That's the interesting thing, which is if you think about the fantasies that kids have, and that they play and that they imagine in the worlds that they build. It's always, of course, whatever their ideal world is, where there's lots of candy and the
totally. I get to go to the pool every day, and I have a tree fort, and
the waterfall is made out of
squirrels are my friends, or whatever.
But when you think about, if you were an adult, what would be your fantasy? Well, to live in a paradise, I don't have to work, there's no such thing as pain. I look and feel like I'm, 21 years old at the height of which is, because that's the other thing that for me is the tip off that a lot of this is just fantasy, which is you say, well, what do you look like in heaven? It's like, oh, at my peak favorite, of course, why bother even asking? And it's just sitting there going, if you were to take people who never believed in religion, of any kind that hadn't been exposed to it, and you said, what would you most want if there was an afterlife and you could make it? It would tend to be something like that.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
absolutely. And there's so many things we miss out on in life because it's short. And I think I understand the desire to have more time to do those things.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned by the mental gymnastics and avoidance necessary to not actually look at what you're wishing for there and how terrible it would be in the long term. And also, yeah, it's self-deceptive, and I don't. The coward dies many times before his death, the valiant taste of death but once. If I'm going to die, I'm not going out like a bitch.
Well, I think I actually like the second version better, but who said the first one? Because I forget who said that one. I know that
I think it's Seneca, or it might not be, like, obviously translation, and it could be a summary of.
I'll look in. Yeah, that's the death.
Seneca. I quote a lot. Honestly, sometimes I lose track of where I'm quoting from because there's so much. But it's funny. I know what I want on my tombstone, and I've known actually since before I was an atheist. Just the word prospice. It's a poem by Robert Browning. And we were looking at poems on death in high school because, poems are about sex and death, and they don't want us to think about sex. So death it is. And we compared it to Crossing the Bar. And it laughs at the idea of being afraid of death. Fear death, to fear the fog in my throat, the mist in my face, when the snows cry or the blast denote I am nearing the place. I should hate that death bandaged my eyes and forbore and made me creep past. No. Let me bear the brunt of it, fare like my peers, the heroes of old. In a moment pay glad life's arrears of pain, darkness, cold. For in a moment the worst turns the best to the brave. And that's like, if you have to face death, you want to face death like that? Or do you want to face it crying and screaming and writhing and being carried out like dragged away? No contest.
I mean, one thing which I also just thought of concerning death was the following. I don't know if this is a real part of Greek mythology or if it was just part of the movie. I think it was Clash of the Titans or something like that. But there was this woman who was sort of punished by the gods with eternal life. And you go to wonder, why is this a punishment? And it's a punishment because every once in a while she falls in love with other people, and all those people die. All those people, it tears her heart out constantly. And while that would probably not be the case in heaven, I can only imagine what it must be like to be in heaven and to constantly have your heart teared out when you see other people going to hell and being punished for eternity and all that stuff.
Well, and that's one of the things that certain theologies will account for by basically robbing you of your memory and of your identity by saying, you either will be so impressed with God's justice in burning everyone you ever loved who didn't, toe the line, because that's good and moral, or you will cease to remember them because that would cause you pain, and there's no pain in heaven. So it's like madness.
Yeah, but the thing is, if there's a person in heaven who is named Renee, who looks like me, who talks like me, but who doesn't remember his loved ones, or who simply doesn't care for his loved ones, or who doesn't care for their suffering and them burning in hell, then that entity is not me.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's a person that may be like me, but it's the person who I hold in high contempt and who I have nothing but disgust for.
And it would basically, you have to become a less moral, less loving, less caring person in heaven.
Yeah.
Because that is the idea of a foundation and a purpose and a moral, is to become worse than you are now that you care.
I want to just make a quick announcement. Kyle's lawyer is in the live chat, and he's here, I guess, ostensibly because he thinks we need some help with ethics. And to Kyle's lawyer, I want to say we really actually do need a lot of help with ethics. And if you know anyone who's ethical who would be willing to talk to us about ethics, please pass that person forward. Anyways, going on. Sorry, I wanted to.
I'm sorry. I must have missed that. I was too busy quoting.
Oh, your quote was Julius Caesar. I looked it up. Not the actual person. It was the play Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare.
Okay, there we go.
And
that sounds like me.
Let me give the quote. Let me give the quote because I think it's. It does sound better reverse. So I'll do it. The valiant never taste death but once. The coward dies many times.
I like my way better.
Well, no, what was the second part you did? I did like your way. Don't be a bitch for death, or no, what was it?
I'm not going out like a bitch.
I'm not going out like a bitch. There you go. I think if Julius Caesar had said that, I think Brutus might have changed his mind. I think things might have turned around a bit if Julius Caesar had a bit more of an attitude. But you know.
They like that sass in Rome.
Well, and he's all, I'm going to be highfalutin, and everyone's going to sit here and worship how I talk, and it's just sort of like, dude, just get to the fucking point.
It's Shakespeare, though. Let's face it. Bless him, but his monologues, while brilliant, are not exactly concise.
No, yeah, no. Well, things that are well put often aren't as concise as you might like, but I except for the I'm not going out like a bitch. I think that one qualifies. That does both. So, anyways, I'm sorry to have derailed the topic. I saw Kyle's lawyer, and he follows me to a great many streams, and he's
Which
boy, the one that says Kyle's lawyer. But here's the thing.
Sorry. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
It's easy if it's advantageous for Kyle. It's ethical.
It's easy if it's advantageous for. Yeah. There you go. Okay. So you go. You met Kyle's lawyer. So he's Yeah, he's an interesting one. He also, regrettably, was the first one to super chat to In Time, which we still have him on the leaderboard. Like, can somebody please super chat so we don't have Kyle's lawyer? And then I failed to do it, so he issued me a demand letter that I fulfill our obligations because I missed the super chat. It didn't come up on the screen. I missed the super chat because I went through Streamlabs. We failed to do it, and I got a demand letter, which is actually really it was a demand tweet. I got a demand tweet from Kyle's lawyer. So we did that, but he's been a problem. He's around, but he seems to be reasonably nice. Anyways, I didn't mean to have that just kind of derail everything, and I do apologize.
You just have to stop getting involved in everybody's drama.
Well, involved is such a. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay. Point taken. So all right. Well, and there is some interesting comments that I think are certainly worthy of discussion, but aren't necessarily the topic. But people are talking about all sorts of stuff we could always bring up at some point. But to get back,
well, and like yes. Alabar 2 said, can purpose exist in a universe that is a product of randomness and chaos? And I'm like, people don't understand that randomness and chaos is not what naturalism is. It has an element of randomness in the same way that Monopoly does, because you roll the dice and that's random. But it, still things work in a certain way.
I mean, it's often a part of equivocation. Like, I mean, the universe is run by laws, right? And those laws are by no means random. So I don't know where they get the idea from that naturalism entails randomness, because it doesn't.
Well, because they think the opposite of intention is randomness. That actually, the week we do design, I'm going to get into that, because I was actually raised with creationism and intelligent design and all that bullshit. So I can tell you some of the sort of convoluted presuppositions that they taught us to take in. And to be honest, like, I didn't realize until afterwards how ridiculous they were. But at the same time, someone was silly enough to actually specifically lay them out for me. So that was probably a bad move on their part.
So now, just out of curiosity, I assume everybody here is a determinist, or I mean, it sort
as
of
far as
sounds like,
free will go, you mean as
yeah.
as far as the free will thing goes? Personally, I don't really care about the free will discussion that much. Like, I don't care if I have free will or not. I definitely do think that libertarian free will is not reasonable to believe, but I would probably line up with compatibilism, but lean towards determinism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a pure determinist either. I don't think that our will has no impact on anything that we do. But I mean, I think we're affected by our circumstances a lot more than we like to imagine. I think we probably have a lot less choice than we think, but I haven't gone full determinism, like all the way over.
But
I don't know. What's your opinion, Nick?
Determinist, 100% determinist, all the
So
way.
there was no way for you not to say that.
Yeah, no, no, correct. There was absolute, thank you. Yeah, well, we could have that discussion, but you are correct. That was well done. That was really meta. That was good. That was good. Correct. I gave you the only answer I possibly could.
Exactly. Well, you know, and that's I forget what the fallacy is of, you know, trying to looking at everything that came before and thinking that it was directed to this moment. I mean,
post hoc ergo propter hoc.
Yeah, but with the idea that, you know, the whole universe at the beginning of time and the stars formed and exploded and rotated into galaxies just so that we could be right here, right now, arguing about determinism. Like, it just, and yet I was taught to think that.
Yep.
And it's crazy. And I was also taught that humility was a virtue.
The whole universe was designed with just us in mind, but be humble.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing which I do want to say, which is sort of a case study of how sort of our environment influences us, and then I think I can tie it back to the actual topic.
Yes,
because as you both know, I'm a massive Harry Potter fan. And I've watched a YouTube video where sort of Voldemort is psychologically analyzed, and a lot of it ties back into his childhood, like he was raised an orphan, and he sort of was in a power position, and he was therefore able to abuse power, and he never really experienced love, so he sort of had these sociopathic tendencies as a child to become a collector and all that stuff, and it's very interesting to sort of psychologically analyze it. But I do think that this is also one of the things that's so dangerous about fearing death, because if you fear death, you're probably not going to create Horcruxes, but you're going to become very desperate and very cling to this goal of having eternal life, and that can be a really dangerous thing, which I think Voldemort has demonstrated to us, that you can become really fringe.
Yeah, you can. And this is why my favorite movie is The 13th Warrior.
Oh, what was that? That was who was the actor in that? That's and he was
Antonio Banderas.
That was Antonio Banderas. That's right.
Yeah, Antonio Banderas played. It was essentially like if Beowulf was real, but you took Antonio Banderas as a Saccharin or Moor or whatever the correct term was for people from the Middle East back then, who went and visited Norsemen, and then they have Hrothgar's mead hall and all that. So they do take names and things from the original Beowulf, but it's though there's this sort of secondary main character, this short curly-haired guy who's, I can't remember his name, he's sort of the one among the group that most befriends Antonio Banderas. And he's very much a fatalist. The old father has rolled out the skein of your life. Go and hide in a hole if you like. You won't live 1 minute longer. But the entire attitude of that culture, and it may have had something to do certainly with how brutal and difficult life was at that time, was, I'm not going to be afraid of death. That's stupid. Like, just why would you do that? Why? And yeah, they had this chant that I just love.
I'll confess, and I say this. I actually do. I wish it were true. There are a lot of atheists who are sitting there saying, "Why would you wish it? Why would you wish to be a slave?" I don't know that my view on it is that you're a slave, but I certainly understand that perspective. But I understand the ability to see it the other way. I do kind of wish it was true. I certainly don't wish in the Old Testament God. that I'm really.
Oh gosh, no.
And people, when I say I wish it was true, they strawman me and say, "Why would you want the Old Testament God?" I was like, well, first of all, we always pick the gods we believe in anyway. So I mean, if you could pick any God, if you could pick any afterlife, if you could pick what if you could invent it, well, I don't see why you wouldn't want to. I am afraid of death, and I'm afraid of never seeing my kids again. And I'm there are a lot of things that, and I think it's human to feel these things. I don't think that it's a good idea to make believe to try to overcome these fears. In fact, I think that's a very poor idea for a number of reasons. But I get it. Boy, do I get it. I sympathize.
I mean, one thing which I'd want to say is, I also kind of would want there to be a God, not the Christian God, but I could certainly do with a divine body who can help me out with my difficulties and with my tests and with my struggles, and who's just there for me, who I can talk to. I mean, it's always good to have more friends, right? Especially if they're in power.
Especially if they're omnipotent. That would make driving to work a lot easier. Like, God, buddy, there's this car in the road. This guy cut me off, God. Can you just do something lightning?
Star Trek that shit.
But what I would not want to be true would be like an eternal afterlife. I mean, I would definitely hate that. I would go so far that if I died, if I stand before God, I would be very disappointed. Because that's the thing about life, is that pretty much all I did live for was to end up there. I mean, I didn't have to study law. I didn't have to make friends. I didn't have to have a family. I didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was die. I could have just been
really
sitting on TV all day and having done nothing. And like, what was the point of my life? Why did I need to struggle?
Well, and life
what was it all good for? If I end up in heaven anyways, then all that is gone.
I mean, a creator God is a large part of the problem, because if a God created this universe, he's a fucking cunt. But Kimo Maki in the comments section, the live chat, says, if a God exists, it can be conquered. And that I can get behind. Kimo, you and I, we're good. We can ride together. That's awesome, because no way.
And I also read in the comments from Kirk Nightwolf that achievement life for sure, and I have to 100% agree with that. If there's an afterlife, then this life is essentially just something that has to be endured, something that I have to get through. It's like pretty much the first meal in an eternal dinner. So
yeah, it's
what's the point?
Well, and as Dan Barker says, if you go to a restaurant and you order like a 3-course meal and the appetizer comes and it's just absolute shit, it's the worst thing you've ever tasted, it's dirty, weird, do you say, oh well, the next course will be so much better to make up for this?
No,
that's not. But I do want to address what you said, Nick, because I think for me, the reason I am so much less afraid of death is that I know there are things worse than death. And I know that there are fears worse than the fear of death. And what was given to me, faith, as a hope to get away from death, it did more to terrorize me than death could ever do. And in consequence, like, I no longer can see the hope in it, because that hope was twisted to so much more evil than the fear of death itself could do. So for me, that's why I don't fear death, because I'm like, fuck it. I've lived with way worse fears than this. Like, this is nothing. I can just I can do that. I've had worse. Like,
Yeah.
sounds crazy, but it's true.
No, well, no, and I think that's one reason that, I mean, the three of us each have had very different experiences with this, and have different. We've sort of we're all atheists and we're all anti-theists, and we're all pretty vocal about it, but we've gotten there a different way, and I think we're also all reasonable, but we still have different approaches and different ways of viewing it, which I think is what makes this group special. But well, and Lilith. So I'm gonna dox Lilith. I'm gonna reveal a secret, which is she does, after these shows, go to, and she gives the password. It's still Fidelio, and we all know what I'm talking about. She goes to those eyes wide shut parties, and so she's wearing the mask. Yep, she's wearing the mask not to, she's wearing the mask because she's going to a party afterwards, and it's one of those parties that all of us atheists dream about when we give up God, and we think that that's what we're going to be doing every night, and it turns out, no, we still got to take out the trash and do all the regular stuff, except for Lilith, who still lives that life. I just don't know how she did it.
You mean the parties where we atheists go together and we meet up and we hide all these transitional fossils for the scientists to find?
Yes, that's exactly
what I
Yeah,
mean.
that's we can do a crossover with the nudist orgy in the woods. If you want to come right up on the Burgess Shale, we can make that work.
That's the other argument that I always get all the time. That's just like, well, the only reason you want to be an atheist is so that you can, be immoral and you can sin, you can do all these other things. I was like, listen, I understand that that's what you're told. Do you see any evidence of that? Do you see me doing anything but driving my kids to school, filling out my taxes, doing all the same stuff that everybody? I wish, and I did when I signed that paperwork saying I'm officially an atheist. I thought I was going to be doing all those orgies and parties and stuff like that, and I ain't doing none of that. I don't know what's going on. Isn't that the deal?
I know.
Didn't somebody say when we become an atheist, all of a sudden we don't have to worry about anything? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, because apparently we don't live here, and cause and effect stops if there's no one to roast you alive. So, then we obviously just did it to sin and have no morals, which of course to them pretty much means we all want to be gay. Or have all the sex.
I want my bestiality brothels. I want that. I was promised. SJ told me that's what we get. I don't know why I haven't found any. Like I was telling Renee, listen, I'm against it morally, with the exception of a couple of poodles that I've seen that I'm like, okay, maybe I'll experiment. But this is what I was promised, and I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard. In reality, I'm not really so interested in the bestiality brothels, but I am looking for a nice Satanist to come and defile a church altar with me. So.
Well, I think and you've made some friends in the live chat, and I think that's really what these kind of discussions are about: is coming together and finding ways to do interesting things on church property.
Anyone want me to ride them on the altar or go by a Virgin Mary statue? We'll talk.
So somebody in the live chat's been picking a fight with me, and and it was going good because I am simultaneously in two different chats in two different ways, and they're trying to figure out how it works, and they can't find me because I don't exist. I'm in the ether. But once I realized that they might be able to find me, I told them what any ethical person would. I said that I'm really actually Lilith liberated. So hopefully that's cleared up.
Renee, you gotta help me out here. He's always throwing me under the bus.
Listen, I am full of bravado, and I am a brave person until people actually know where I live. Once you find out my address, I'm like, oh, that's go get somebody else. Don't mess with me, man. I'm not. So, it's easy to throw Lilith under the bus because she doesn't know where I live.
I mean, Lilith, that's where you see with the immoral atheists, like once you become an atheist, you are accountable to no one anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, and presumably
Right.
that's why you want to do it. And I actually remember when I was a theist, and I do prefer that time, actually, in many ways. I don't think it's more moral to be that way. I think it's more moral to I think truth is the single most important thing. But I do remember that time, and I found it comforting. I'd rather that.
I found it comforting, but I found it comforting in comparison to the far greater fear that the church had implanted in me.
Yeah.
It's like an abuser. They cause all this fear that you didn't have, and then they provide you comfort, slightly less comfort than the fear. But then you feel like if that comfort is taken away, you'll have to go, you'll have to deal with all of this fear, when in reality, the whole thing goes, and once you settle out, you're like, oh, the whole thing was bullshit.
Yeah.
Fuck. Yeah. Okay, then.
Which is why I always say that the Bible may be full of myths and full of fairy tales, but the Bible does know how to psychologically manipulate you and how to use concepts like sin and hell and heaven against you, so that you will not question it, that you will believe it, and that people can make money off of you.
True. Although it's difficult too, because I know that many pastors are really truly sincere, and they are at the same time they are victims of this highly evolved mental manipulation scheme, and they are perpetrators.
I think that's an interesting, and that's the other one. When people get upset at ministers, I do think I have an argument that I've made that I think as much as, especially when you get into the higher levels, 50% are actually atheists. And I have an argument for that, and I demonstrate how and why I believe that, and I believe that quite strongly, that as many as 50%, and when you get up to bishops, cardinals, especially in the Catholic Church, they're atheists. But for the ones that aren't, the thing is, they're just as much a victim as anybody else. And so when you start getting upset with them and saying, oh my God, how can they perpetrate this, and they're evil people, except if they believe it, then they're victims, and they have the same problem. So when you sit there and say we're trying to rescue people from these beliefs that cause the significant problems that we've already discussed, and I don't think any of us really object to the person who may be a deist or has their own sort of personal beliefs. It's the ones who really try to impose them on others. They're a victim too.
As far as the deist goes, the deist, I think the deist is wrong too, but the deist is not as catastrophically wrong as the fundamentalist 6,000-year-old Earth creationist.
Yeah.
Religion is like this. I don't approve of any of it, but it's like sex. If you don't involve me, it's none of my business, provided you're not victimizing people, and particularly children. So don't involve me. Keep it out of my space, and I won't have anything to say about it.
Yep.
The thing is, that cannot be done, because beliefs aren't private here.
No, I know. The deists and some of the pagans tend to be like that.
Yep.
Some of the smaller groups, your Wiccan types, they don't really proselytize and push their stuff. But it is impossible with Christianity. It's impossible with the Abrahamic religions, largely because theirs is a supremacist, absolutist ideology, and you can't. It's not allowed. It's a sin in many senses not to try and force everyone.
But I think the thing about beliefs is, let's take an easy example, which obviously is not the case, but let's just say hypothetically I was a sexist. Now, I could choose to never reveal that to anybody, to never outright say, yeah, I'm a sexist, but the fact of the matter is the way I would conduct myself if I would be indicative of the fact that I am sexist. This would not be a belief that I could hold privately. That belief cannot exist in a vacuum. It would show in a way in the ways I were to interact with Lilith. It would show in a way in which I interact with other women. And so beliefs do not exist in a vacuum.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. But with beliefs like sexism, and with all beliefs that are not denoted sacred by someone. The beliefs are based on their effects, or assessed, judged. It's like they, judge a tree by its fruit. If a concept like sexism oppresses people and we say, fuck off, we're done with that, and we struggle back towards it, and fight back and struggle for equality, then you get this dynamic and the change over time and the change in the marketplace of ideas. And that idea is conquered because it's a bad idea. Even if you personally still held it, on the larger collective community, it becomes less and less acceptable, and it becomes something you have to withdraw more and more from yourself, and honestly may stop holding parts of it just because they have no outlet, and so they are not reinforced. But if an idea is sacred, then, or held to be sacred, then it has divine authority. Then you're supposed to not judge it on any but the good consequences.
I'm sorry. I did neglect. I want to answer that, but I neglected something too, which is we got a super chat. And it was let's see, it was this one guy. I apologize. I hope he's still in the stream. I will say it's a $2 super chat. Thank you very much. Now I'm supposed to read these. Fortunately, we didn't get because Kyle's
this
lawyers.
One guy, yeet.
Yeet. He said yeet. So I'm contractually obligated to repeat that. So I do. There's sometimes when you get the hate super chats where somebody sits there and puts in something that they want you to read. So Kyle's lawyer had put in last time that he was going to sue everyone in the stream. So at least he hasn't super chatted. But thank you for the yeet, whatever a yeet is. I'm sure it's very important.
I don't actually know.
I don't know either, but it was worth $2, and thank you very much.
Hey, honestly, I kind of love hate super chats because it's like you want so much to tell me you hate me that you're going to pay me for the privilege of telling you hate
exactly.
me.
Well, at least for the hate super chats, we get a lot of good super chats too, and a lot of really positive ones. So I think there are a lot more positive ones, but the hate ones are always interesting, and what to do with those. But yeah, super chats, it's a love-hate relationship. But thank you very much for that, and I let that slip. I got distracted. And there are two things I wanted to bring up. The first is, yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Lilith, which just always, because I if I have the choice, I would rather throw her under the bus than agree with her. But I'm morally obligated to what I agree with her. Just admit. I think so. I think there are different tiers of what the damage belief does, and I think Renee, you've got a very good point, which is actually there's no real way to keep beliefs completely private. They're going to influence you, and then therefore they're going to influence other people. But I think there's sort of what's a reasonable one, and Sam Harris did that one very well, where he said, listen, if somebody, there are beliefs where, for the most part, eventually they'll be sort of self-corrected. If you believe that Elvis is still alive and walking around, and if you explain that belief at a job interview, you will immediately pay a price in terms of credibility.
I saw that one as well.
Yeah, and so and then it's the same thing with astrology, and it's the same thing. And it's the same thing with sexism. You're going to pay a price. So the question is, what are the beliefs? But the other thing that Sam Harris had said, and this ties into it, and it was funny because when he first said this, I was like, I'd love to reach the point where I could say that. I don't really believe him, but when he mocks Thor, he gets hate mail from people he says nobody believes in Thor anymore. That's just Thor. And he gets hate mail
and
from people.
all the Marvel fanboys are like, hey!
It's not the Marvel fanboys. It's the real. Oh, no, because, and then I've done the same thing, which is, so polytheists, for the most part, just like you had suggested, Lilith, polytheists, for the most part, do not proselytize, and they don't care. And if you want to believe in their gods, great. If you don't, fine, leave them alone. So I've met a number of polytheists. Ocean is one that I think we've all met on Twitter, and believes in Thor. And it was funny because I was in a stream with him on the GDC. He wasn't in the stream yet, but he was in the live chat. And Steve McRae said, well, nobody believes in Thor anymore. Thor's just like, Ocean's in the live chat and he has the key. He can get in. Steve, don't say that. And sure enough, Ocean drops in. And
I believe in Thor.
Yeah. And when you get into polytheism, which is really fascinating, and it's one of the few, and I'm almost done here because I don't want to dominate, but so when you get into polytheism, and it's not this, they believe it, and it's a little strange for people who haven't who just sort of think that Christianity and Hinduism are sort of the main ones, and polytheists who believe it. But they don't proselytize, and they are very much like, and that's why I consider Judaism one of the least damaging religions. It's an Abrahamic religion, especially Hasidic Jews, and the more traditionalists can be extraordinarily bad.
Only the most liberal factions of Judaism are not very harmful, and like the Orthodox and they honestly have almost as many abuse scandals as the Catholic Church.
Well, so I sort of mean, I guess, sort of more the modern American Jews, sort of very much like the modern American Muslims, which then we sit there and say, well, Muslims aren't an issue. Well, the modern American Muslims aren't representative of the average Muslim worldwide. But I did want to bring this up, and then I'm done, which is Iron Charioteer had brought up, and I told him I would bring this up, and this is why I tried to dovetail into Judaism. I guess Digital Hammurabi had done, this is in the live chat, a video on child sacrifice in Israel, modern children's sacrifice by Jews. And
modern?
And he's got a link to it. It is in the but so I'm bringing this up because I wanted to sort of come full circle into the damage from religion and Judaism. I normally consider, for the most part, an exception. Lilith acknowledged that they're not, and here is another very strong acknowledgement that in many cases they're not. So he's dropped that in the live chat, and I think that's.
I need to see that because that is fucked in the head.
One thing which I want to get cleared up on Judaism is the following, because do you mean by Judaism sort of the belief in Judaism, or merely being part of sort of the tribe? Because I know that there are many people who are sort of part of people group, but who don't believe in God. I mean, I know many people on Twitter who sort of have a Jew.
Like a ceremonial. They do the atheists. Festivals and eat the food, which I mean,
there are many secular Jews who are in reality atheists.
No, and I have no problem with these people whatsoever. Like I criticize ideas. I criticize individual people for their actions. I criticize groups for the actions that their policies enable. But primarily I criticize ideas. And like ancestral Jews, that there's no, I don't even see how you could have a problem with them just having been born Jewish. I have a problem with people taking the worst parts of their ancestral faith seriously in ways that destroy human lives. But the vast majority of Jews in North America, for example, don't do that. Not even a little bit. So yeah, I'm judging people based on their actions. I'm judging religions based on their results. I'm judging ideas based on their truth, as far as I can tell. So I couldn't possibly, I guess I couldn't imagine, although I do know that there was a lot of hatred of ancestral Jews in Europe and stuff, the holdover from the Middle Ages and Christianity and other Christianity. That obviously, I mean, we all know where that led. But that was never anything that I was interested in criticizing. You're born as you're born. I couldn't imagine caring. Hell, I'll swap recipes. Latkes are freaking delicious.
Oh yeah.
Sour cream. Oh, and lox and cream cheese bagels. I mean, come on. Come on. You can't
Well,
hate that.
excuse me. No, I think you do have to make that distinction, and I think a lot of, excuse me, I had to go over there, and I said I'm gonna grab a quick snack and just get something to eat. And now my mouth is completely full. So excuse me.
Nick.
I know when I'm off camera, I'm sneaking food and all. So I think somebody suggested that for my AVI on Twitter, I just have the chair. And it's like, half the time that's all there is, and you're talking, but it's just the chairs there. I think it's interesting because in the United States, our Christians tend to be much more radicalized. They're not radicalized compared to, say, Africa or other countries, but they are radicalized compared to most other nations. When they look at our Puritan roots, they look at the percentage of Americans who actually believe in the literal word of the Bible, the percentage of Americans who reject evolution. We're much more radicalized in our Christianity than other countries, but we're much more liberal when it comes to Judaism, when it comes to Islam. We have extremists here, but it's not nearly as bad as it is in other countries. And that's one reason why when you talk about, and again, go back to Sam Harris, he talks a lot about when they did a survey, Pew did a survey of Muslims across the world.
Wasn't that British Muslims the one you're talking about?
Well, no, the Pew study was of all Muslims across the world, and the views on average were extraordinary. I mean, it was 78% said it was okay to kill civilians. A huge number were for martyrdom. And you sit there and you say, oh my God, how can you do this? Well, because if you're an American who's met Muslims in the United States, they're moderate and they don't have these beliefs, and you can't distinguish them from anybody else.
Actually, a lot of them do.
I think a fair number do.
Oh no, I'm not talking about the crazy ones. I'm talking about the ones that are common on the street and who would never say those things out loud to you. I know because Christians have a lot of those beliefs. And when we talk about the Muslim idea of jihad and martyrdom, and it's totally fucked in the head, don't get me wrong. But how much different is that from the sheer amount of torture porn that I was exposed to as a kid about Christian martyrs, and, all the way from Stephen to the bits about the, the lions and the, Fox's Book of Martyrs and all the martyr stories that I read, coming from behind the Iron Curtain and people tortured for their faith. There is a lot that goes into the background culture. I mean, that's why I brought up the thing about the purpose of your life being a slave.
Yeah.
Because that is literally what it is. And some people are willing to say it, but a lot more people won't use that term, but fundamentally believe that core idea.
I think that's true, that there are more than we acknowledge or than we would see just looking at them. But I think the average in America is still reasonably moderate. I may be wrong, but that seems to be A, what the polls suggest, and B, what the behavior suggests. And certainly groups that represent Muslims are in the US usually condemn and act against that. And after 9/11, there were a number of Muslim groups that were extraordinarily helpful in finding and I would just told the FBI, look, ask us anything, and we're there, and we will help you. Now, that seems to me to suggest that they are more moderate. They may be doing that again just to pass that off, and really that's not their belief. So at that point, it gets very difficult to tell who really believes in what.
But again, that you get into the no true Christian Muslim fantasy, and that those people have, maybe they jihaded the wrong way and they are bad now, so they are the wrong kind of Muslim, and we can throw them under the bus. I saw a lot of that attitude and that logical process, if you want to call it that, in Christianity. That's why Protestants refuse to allow Christianity to take any historic responsibility for the atrocities of the Catholic Church, because those aren't real Christians.
Yeah, and I think that's true, and that argument, oh my God, that argument becomes insane. How many? 3,000 mutually excommunicative sects of Christians. Every one of them thinks they're the only Christian. Every
Extra
one of the
ecclesiam nullus
3,000.
sanctus.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. I talk with ones of every one of those sects, and they say we're not excommunicative of the other sects. And I was like, okay, well then, what's the difference in your beliefs? And sure enough, they think that none of the others are saved, and that's the code. They say, oh, I don't think they're all going to hell. I just think they're not saved.
Which means they're going to hell.
Which means they're going. They just don't want to say it.
Yeah.
They don't want to say it, and they don't want to admit, because they understand the fundamental problem of admitting that you think every other sect is going to hell, which is then how do you know you're right and they're wrong? And you can't use a single argument that the others can't use. There's no if you had that argument,
it's just about your particular interpretation of the Bible, and maybe if you've studied a bit, something by Aquinas or Maimonides or something like that. But no, it's insanity. But the thing is, when they say they're not all going to hell, it's the idea that God will judge the heart because God sees the heart. And among those people, even though their theology is not the correct one, so that the church collective is not saved, yet there may be good and sincere people doing the best they can, and God will know his own because he is just so terribly merciful, and he'll only roast the ones who aren't like that.
Only roast. Yeah. Well,
this is my impressed face.
it's weekend. We are all okay. Well, hold on one second. Just I'm gonna okay. I am genuinely impressed with that impressed face. So here's what I'm going to do. I would like everyone to, Lilith, just keep that face up. And normally I try not to break the fifth wall too much when I'm doing anything like that, but that impressed face is so good that what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to take that impressed face and I am going to white box it. And everybody ready? Lilith is very impressed, and that is her idea of the religions talking about they know what's best and that they're right and God will judge the heart. I love that. That's it. All right. Sorry everyone, I had to white box that for everybody. I will put her back in her little square, but Lilith, for 10 seconds there, you had the entire screen all to yourself. The entire, over everybody, over the whole. That's a good face. I apologize. I just had to.
Now my chin's all wrinkly.
Right.
It's all about angles, and I kind of have an awkward setup. I'm going to have to move in a couple of months, and so I'm hoping to set myself up with a more intentional setup when that happens.
I think we've had a couple of questions about Aquinas. We've had some questions about Greek mythology, and I would absolutely love to deal with all of them. And I think we're still sort of working out the format a little bit. We're working on a couple. This is still a new channel, but these are great questions. I hope you guys will come back. Hopefully next time we will be simulcasting to the GDC and our channel, but subscribe to our channel, and then you will always know when we're up. Subscribe to the GDC, because that's also, please do that. But I think we're gonna need to get going soon, so I don't think we can deal with those questions today. But that's the stuff we talk about, and maybe the other thing we could do is a call-in show. I think would be absolutely great, and people can just ask us questions in the live chat, and we can just discuss it and go on as long as. So these are great questions. Sub to Veritas Voices, and we will be discussing whatever you want to discuss. But until that time, does anybody have? I think I'd love to hear sort of a last word. From everybody on the topic, and then also what everybody is doing that is outside Veritas Voices that people might be interested in, because we all do lots of interesting stuff where people can find everyone. So Lilith, let's start with you. Last say on the topic and on what you're doing, because I know you've got a lot. You've always got a lot going on. You're just like
Actually, I've unfortunately been a bit distracted with real life concerns. Like I said, I'm going to be moving in a couple of months, so I've been sidetracked with that.
Where are you going to? I did want to.
A
You don't
different
need to
part
pay
of
for
Western Canada.
Canada. You're going to Canada?
Western Canada. I live in Canada.
Why did I think you lived in the U.S.?
Oh, because you're American, sweet pea. You think everyone lives in the
Because I think
U.S.
everybody lives in the. Well, listen, if I had realized you lived in Canada, I'd have started in with the Canada jokes a lot sooner.
Oh, goody.
90% of all my friends are Canadian, and I don't know what you guys are all the best, and I get really I have an inferiority complex about it, also because I compare your leader to our leader, and the only thing I can do really is try to find something to make fun of, and that's basically moose and maple syrup, and that's it. Because for the most part, between education, between healthcare, and all these other things, it's like if I really get into an intellectual argument with you guys, I'm in real trouble.
Sorry, sweetheart.
Yeah.
But my last word on the topic is that there is no meaning or purpose in a life with God. In a life without it, you have a chance to make a difference, to have meaning. In a life subjected to God, you are nothing but a tool. And if you want meaning and purpose, you have to fight for it, like anything else that's worth it.
All right, Renee, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think if you were to start with Canada jokes, then I think Lilith would probably win that if she brings up the certain issues in America.
Well, that's why,
Yes.
Renee, that's why I'm the one with the mute button. Do you think I can win a fair fight? No, I can't. So Lilith, I think all Canadians are wimps who are overly polite and can't do anything. And if you disagree with me, respond now. Oh, was your mic
That's
muted?
not true. That's not true at all.
Well, you know that, Renee, because we kicked more ass in World War II than you would believe. But we are, though we be small, we are mighty. We tend to go for what's effective and not just force the numbers. But it really doesn't matter, because Canadians are cool that way. We have fun bitching about things and even making fun of ourselves because we have it where it counts.
But
we don't need to be insecure.
That's what you think. But you see, here's the flaw in your logic, which is if you have lots of bravado and you look like you can do things, you don't really have to be able to do anything. We can't do anything, but we act like it, and that's a lot easier. And frankly, I think
how's that working out for you right about now with all those trade wars?
Beautifully, thank you. Well, we have more respect in the world than we ever have, and
okay.
I think. Okay, we're not getting into delusions today. We're saving that for another topic.
Yeah.
You need to talk to your drug dealer. He is he's not giving you the good stuff.
Okay. Oh no, he's giving me the good stuff. I need it bad, because it's good given what's going on. I mean, things are going great, Lilith, and I really don't appreciate what you're suggesting. But that's fine. You're Canadian. You have to. So Renee, what have you got going on? What's your last word on the topic, and what have you got going on?
Privately, I have sort of some university stuff going on, but I also right now have vacation, so I don't have to go to university, but I still always have to learn and to keep up with law and all that stuff. Normally, I'm also really active on Twitter, and I tweet a lot. I tweet a lot about the God debate. I also have other issues to address that also tie in with that stuff. And as far as the topic goes, all I can say is that purpose is not something that is handed down to you, that is given to you. Purpose is something that you have to choose for you. This is true irrespective of whether you're Christian or Muslim, theist, or famous tribe atheist. You have to choose what you want. You have to choose your own meaning. You have to choose your own purpose. And you have to decide what you want to do with your life. I'm deciding daily what I want to do with my life. I've decided that I wanted to join with you today and hang out with friends and discuss some fun topics. And in the end, it's your life to live. Live it as best as possible, and then you don't need God for it.
All right. Well, thank you. So
On
I
the
would.
contrary, even God would be a hindrance to living a good life.
I agree. I'll say my conclusion is the purpose of life is freedom, and she who is brave is free.
I like that. All right. So I would like to add before I do my thing that we're still we missed a couple weeks, but we're going to be really focusing on, again, simulcasting. If you have ideas, if you want to talk about any of us, if there's anything that you want to suggest or engage with, you can contact any of us on Twitter. We are easy to find. We've also been in the live chat, so you can find where we are. There's going to be all that contact information. But we also have a Twitter account for Veritas Voices. Get in touch with that, and if there's something you want to discuss, if there's some an idea you have, we are open to all of it. So please don't hesitate to contact either of us or the Veritas Voices Twitter account, and let us know what you think. And please, we hope to see you next time. I don't think I can contribute anything new to the actual topic. I think Lilith and Renee closed it out marvelously. You have to find your own meaning, and I think that can sometimes be scary. That can be difficult. But the truth is, even if you believed in God, you actually kind of have to do it anyway. In most cases, unless you're one of the highest extremists who really serve God all the time. In that case, I guess it has been picked for you. But I am on Twitter a lot. I own and operate the Atheist Codex, and recently have started a new show, In Time, with Ansgar Odinson. You can find both of that on Twitter, and you can find In Time on YouTube, and we broadcast every Tuesday and Thursday, and on breaking news. So if there's if you just see the chair again and I'm gone, that may just be there's breaking news somewhere and I'm on my phone going, oh my God. But it's
Yeah, you would.
yeah, I would. It's the drama. So well, we actually covered a breaking news story of 6 officers shot in Baltimore. Yeah, I know it's and we've covered that. And while we were doing it, we were going live. Ansgar found 2 things. First of all, there was a woman who had put a basket. She was a walking concession stand. She had taken a basket and put in M&Ms, Skittles, Twizzlers, and then strapped it to her head and was going around just selling concessions to a live gunfight. That was an interesting one. But anyway, so that's and we cover live events and social commentary. We're also going to cover debates and stuff like that. So I hope you guys will come and join us. I hope you guys will be back for the next Veritas Voices, now that we aren't just sort of stuck the entire time, because that didn't make for very good television last time. I'm aware of that. We were working on it, and I think we got it sorted out. So thank you all for coming, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.